Awesome. So welcome everyone. Joined by a great group today to kind of talk about some different automation hiccups and corrections that we're kind of seeing through the marketplace. And yeah, hopefully this is informative. I'll let everybody introduce themselves. First and foremost, I'm Cayden. I'm a solutions engineer here at Openprise. So we've seen, quite a few different problems come through the door. And between me solutioning in real time and kind of connecting with the CS team, uh, able to find a solution for most everything that we've seen. But with that, I've seen a lot of things go wrong, or seen systems that are in disarray because of bad data practices. So that's why I'm kind of here to provide some input as well. But I'll hand it off to you, Jessica, for your intros as well.
Thanks, Cayden. We have a full house of Denver, Colorado cohort here, so it's always good to see some Mountain Time RevOps friends. Thanks, Cayden. My name is Jessica. I also go by JP. I run revenue operations. I run marketing operations. Intentional slip there. At Bazaarvoice. Bazaarvoice is a e-commerce company. We manage user-generated content and helping customers connect with their brands and with their products using collect and display reviews and, again, user-generated content. So happy to be here.
And I'm the other Coloradan. That's it. It's a Denverite here. My name is Rhys Williams. I am one of the founders of Domestique. Domestique is a revenue operations consulting firm. When we think about revenue operations, we tend to think about it broader. That's part of the reason why you probably heard me very passionate earlier. So we think about across customer journey, 5 work streams: strategy, process, tools, data enablement, in that order specifically. And Chris, I fundamentally, that's a fair point, and wasn't trying to come into this meeting super hot. I'm very passionate about certain topics, so and totally appreciate your point. So excited for the conversation today, and yes, at some point, Cayden and Jess will have to get together, and I'll have a beer somewhere here in Colorado. And anybody else who's on the call as well.
Yeah, I'd love to start a Colorado RevOps co-ops cohort. That'd be great. But perfect. Moving right along. The first slide we have, kind of a little bit of a meme here. Who cares about data integrity? You guys can all read. It's Dr. Evil here. Data integrity audit. Can I choose the root canal instead? Yeah. So, when we talk about data integrity, data quality, what that means, it can mean different things to different people. I think, just coming from the Openprise lens, right? We're always interested in the foundations of the data. So like the cleanliness of the data, are things standardized? Are there duplicates? That's usually where we start our conversations within data integrity and data quality. I think, the rest of the panel can answer kind of what that means to them. But yeah, for us at Openprise, it kind of starts with those data foundations.
Jessica, you want to go?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Rhys, I think you have the spiciest take on this, so I'll let you go last for what we talked about yesterday. But we're in complete alignment. It's almost like my cheeky answer to this is nobody that makes decisions at your company really cares about data integrity. And by that, they care about the throughput. They care about the insights. They don't care about how or why or a data enrichment project. Okay, that's a checkbox project. That's something for IT, right? So any exec or any decision maker in your org, if you have a project that's, hey, I want to enrich our key account fields. 20% of them are have a value, 80% of them don't. Our goal is to get to 75%. That's just going to go right over their heads, right? So we want to show a story that has something like, well, we need enrichment because our MQL number is going up. Cool. Our average deal size is going down. And then they come back and they say, oh, well, why is that? What type of companies? Well, I don't know. We don't have data enrichment, right? So it's those insights and helping to explore. So who cares about data integrity? Nobody that makes decisions, but they care about the throughput and the insights.
What's really funny about this, Kate and Jessica and I were on yesterday, kind of like having a prep, and we spent about 20 minutes on this in general. So I plus 100% all the emojis to what Jessica said. So just so everybody hears it, no one fucking cares about data integrity. All they care about is the fact, is it good enough? Meaning, can I make data-driven decisions around this? So to Jessica's point here, as you are thinking about working with your bosses, economic buyers, things like that, if you're going and pitching hey, look, this is an enrichment tool and it's going to help our data integrity, they do not care about that. Like, you need to base it in what they fundamentally care about. And what they care about, executives, economic buyers, the people who control oftentimes the budgets, is the ability to make data-driven decisions. So like the example that, Jessica just gave is like, hey, look, what's actually really interesting is like, we're not being able to target our outbound marketing campaigns well enough because we don't have a great understanding based upon our enrichment today of where the white space is or where our customer base is, because the industry field is pretty out. So like, yes, it's an industry field enrichment issue, but like what you're actually getting at is the fact that we're able to do this, we're going to be more targeted in our outbound, which should drive a higher ROI on. So like, data integrity, don't pitch to your bosses, oh, hey, this is an enrichment. Like, no one will care. I 100% promise you about that. You as operators, you need to care, but you only need to care that it's good enough.
Especially in early stage companies, because this could literally mean the difference in a crappy NRR, a crappy net revenue retention, and an excellent one, right? Yeah. Because you're still defining your ICP, you're still defining, hey, I think this is going to get enterprise companies in, and then all these SMB mom and pop shops come in, and how would you know that without getting that proper data enrichment? So especially in early stage companies, this is really critical.
100% agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those, different stages of data integrity and what that means. Here we go. Some of the key points, data is not good or bad. It's on a spectrum. One of the things we sort of discussed yesterday is, just because one record is incorrect doesn't mean your entire database is incorrect. Obviously, there's isolated incidents, there's outliers to, go through there. And then also, that data integrity is like a, TAM analysis. The answer doesn't matter. You only need it good enough to make the correct data-driven decisions, kind of building on the concept of, if you get most of your database correct, you can make some data-driven decisions to really impact revenue and the bottom line.
Yeah, no, what's really interesting, we had a really good conversation about this yesterday, and I'm curious how many people have sat in meetings where a sales rep, an executive, somebody you may or may not be putting a little bit of pressure on because there's a number that doesn't necessarily like look good on a scoreboard somewhere. And they're like, well, hang on a second, I have this number over here. And then the meeting devolves into this whole like, is this number? Yeah, I'm getting a bunch of emojis. Is this number correct? Will this number correct? It's this classic like, oh, if this one thing is wrong, everything is wrong. And I've sat in about 1,000 of those meetings, like fun tip for and this is the whole point. Like, even the best in class data enrichment tools are going to be batting at 60 or 70%, accuracy, but you can't let the narrative take hold that like this one thing is wrong, so everything is wrong. The whole goal is, again, to Cayden's point here, that data integrity is good enough. We can still make decisions. Oh, and by the way, even if we change this one field that you're getting wrapped around the axle on, that's not going to change the decision in the end, right? Of like, oh my God, if we update this, territories aren't all of a sudden going to change, or we're going to change our outbound strategy. Like, that stuff doesn't matter. You just need to, like, whenever you're in those stuff, I always like, hey, great call. Let's take that offline here. But we're still like, we're getting wrapped around the axle. This number is still off here. What are we doing about that? So being able to pivot out of that, because to Cayden's earlier point, data is not good or bad. You're just trying to continually improve data along the spectrum to essentially say, it's good enough, we can make a data-driven decision. Yeah, Jessica, I'm curious, like, in some of the day-to-day stuff you're doing, like, have you seen this? Where do you see this? Like, what do you do when you kind of run into some of these issues?
Talking about data integrity, when you get sales and marketing in a room and they kind of say one record is incorrect, we've all been there. But those emotional conversations, that's when they tend to start to come with solutions. And by they, I mean our business partners. They start to come with solutions and they say, well, we just need an enrichment strategy. Well, we just need dedupe. Well, we just need a dedupe. So when they come in with these types of solutions, it's up to us as RevOps not to just check the box and execute, but we have to be all things to all people at all times, right? So I think the most important role of RevOps is empowering data literacy through the whole organization, right? So we need to be data stewards, data czars, whatever, of our own data supply chain. And that is the first and foremost, most important thing before executing a data enrichment strategy because they say, oh, well, our vendor sucks. I found this vendor. Let's go with them and see if they suck less, right? Make sure that everybody's on the same page with the data literacy, and it'll make the solution and user stories more easier to implement.
By the way, that Jessica, what you just brought up is like one of the funniest things of like, how many times is this shiny object syndrome of like, how many times like, oh yeah, this one field sucks. And because I don't want to focus on the problem that we're actually talking about, let's talk about this big, switch over to this other vendor, which at the end of the day, the grass is not going to be greener on the other side.
Exactly. It's data isn't just the data that we use, but it's the way we use it. So they're trying to bring a solution and not talking about the way we're using the data. I have so many examples of this, not going back to basics. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into what we should have next is this is actually some material that we utilize here at Openprise to kind of break these things down. And I think it helps us also to understand, what do the data practitioners care about versus kind of what do the executives care about? And these three layers of sort of data quality come to mind. Your technical quality, this is your foundation you're building upon, right? Think standardization, think deduplication. Those live here in just the very bare bones technical quality layer. Next up is operational. Can you make the timely decisions? Am I able to route leads effectively based on my data foundation that lives below, since I can trust that now, right? If you've taken care of that. And then at the very top, can you make those right decisions, those data-driven decisions? And usually what happens is executives will come and they'll ask questions that land in box 3. Why aren't we able to make the right decisions? Why is the attribution model not providing a solid number on the return of investment of all of these different marketing campaigns? Or why am I not able to run an ICP TAM analysis, right? Not understanding that these different layers in which those strategic data quality questions are built upon have not been addressed yet. So one of the ways that we're able to kind of change the lens of what we're talking about, based on who we're speaking to, whether it's data practitioners, operations folks, or executives that are driving or trying to drive those data-driven decisions, this is really helpful in kind of quantifying, the different stakeholders and which data quality component they're really playing in.
I'm curious, just to like do a quick poll, like of everybody here. So we got 30-ish individuals, like at your individual organizations, like where would you say you're up on this pyramid, right? Like how many individuals like trust the data? How many teams are like, all right, we trust it and we can take time and actions, and like then the holy grail, right? How many people trust the data, can take time and actions, and actually make data-driven decisions? Like thoughts, post in the chat. I'm just curious to get like a quick poll. Jessica, I'm curious, like at your organization, where would you place your team, and like what are some of the steps you're doing trying to move up the pyramid?
Yeah, I think it depends on the initiative as well. So, and depends on the company size. So Bazaarvoice is a company about 2,000 people. So we have a really good data supply chain working on it, getting better every day. It's never done. It's never done, right? So we're pretty good at bubbling up these insights. Now, that being said, there's still issues with, can we trust the data, right? So we use ZoomInfo exclusively. So we still have, is this the right company? We need more, right? More. So we did an exercise that said, okay, we need more. Let's take a look at, Rhys, what did you call it? Like your first party data thing? You had a very specific name for it, but like look in your own house first before you go shopping elsewhere. Right?
Oh, yeah. It's I forget. I hate it when past Rhys messes with current Rhys.
Yeah.
Remember?
You had a really good name for it. But basically what we found a bunch of accounts in our ICP that are surging with intent. We use 6 Sense. I have various opinions there on that, but they're surging with intent and they had no contacts. All right. So we were about to go out and spend a bunch of money on new leads when we said, hey, use these guys in our ICP. We have an outbound team. And go, right? So we were able to use kind of some of our own data, because we still started at the bottom tier. Like, can you trust the data? Can we make timely actions instead of just kind of going to ZoomInfo and handing a bunch of money over and saying, hey, can we get some more records? Please, can we have some more records? And when again, early stage companies don't have that luxury either. So that's why thinking about this that's why I love this slide, thinking about it. You need to think about it. Even if you don't trust the data, you still have to think about it from the strategic level and how you're building it out.
And what's really interesting that you're bringing up is a couple of points. One, oftentimes, as long as you have some like reasonably trustworthy, I know what I use. One of the acronyms we like to use at Domestique is Wagner, wild ass guess, not easily refutable. Essentially meaning like, as long as like the enrichment tool or tools that you're using are like directionally good enough, oftentimes you get a lot more bang for your buck if you just sit down and actually like, how do we optimize what we have instead of going through this big old switching thing? And I promise you, if you go through the switch, there's a change, there's a opportunity cost for changing, and no tool is perfect. So like figuring out what you're using today. The other thing that you brought up, Jessica, that I think is really interesting is like, it is never done. So part of what we need to do as operators to establish the trust is partially in and around the messaging, right? And we were alluding to this earlier of like, hey, look, data is really good here. Yeah, we know that there's a couple of gaps here. Let's not like focus on those gaps, but like being able to like pull people out of like getting wrapped around the axle and still showing that there's trust in the data so you can make those data-driven decisions. What's cabling for our team data integrity enablers? However, there could be question about quality due to difference in measurement approach teams. Yeah, this is actually really interesting. I'm curious, Jessica, get your thoughts on this, but like one of the things we've done in the past year, and I apologize if I don't pronounce your name correctly, Kathleen, is one of the things we've done is, and we've got this on a couple of extra slides, is making sure that everybody understands a clearly single source of truth, data definitions and glossary. So, you talk about an MQL or like, hey, look, when we talk about industry, it comes from this field here, is being enriched from this field. So like, everybody is on the same page around it. And it, again, nothing's going to be perfect, but then you're speaking the same language. I'm curious, Jessica, what have you done internally to kind of like?
Yeah, actually, honestly, a few tactical approaches, right? So we know data dictionaries, we know is important. We know we've all run into this before. I've run into this as well. We get a shiny new vendor, we put it in the system, and then some rep starts outbounding, oh, Band-Aid, they're great. Whoops, Band-Aid's already a customer. Oops, our ROE is Johnson & Johnson. That should have never happened. That's wasted time, that's wasted money, and the customer is getting messaging that says that we don't know what we're talking about because they're already a customer, right? So that cost is bad. So again, we know that having that integrity, especially at the account hierarchy level, depending on your business, is really important. But measuring those approaches, there's a couple of things that I like to do, kind of tried and true, is put a cadence together, an actual charter for how you're going to update this. What needs to be real time? If you have a demo request, yep, real time. Maybe a webinar registration, maybe you can wait a little bit on that. For your entire database, maybe every 3 months, maybe every 6 months, maybe every year, right? If you're dealing with customers that don't, shift in their motions very often. So that's one thing. And then the other thing too is making sure if you do put, last updated date on your beautiful records that are nice and filled with integrity, put a date stamp. Always having a date stamp there. I mean, it sounds really simple, but lots of low code possibilities to make this updated, Openprise, and other Salesforce workflows and other things you can do to keep that healthy was really important.
I love your comment about like SLAs around the data integrity, right? It's only the definitions and, but it's also around, hey, this is what we're enriching. Oh, by the way, because this is this type of lead, we don't need to kind of follow up on like by having those clear SLAs, like will drive consistency across all of the team and understanding in terms of around what's the data, where's it coming from? And again, it's answering that question at the bottom of the pyramid. Do I trust the data? And there's, it's just like, yes. And like, it just needs to be directionally correct to be able to answer that yes, which is why we talked about that TAM analysis.
That's right. Yeah, that strategy, that TAM analysis. So I'll never do an enrichment project without a charter like that. And because like a good, RevOps veteran, it's trial and error. What what happened was every record needs to be updated real time all the time. that was the requirement, right? So we go in our little boxes because we're busy and we say, okay, cool, right? Oh, we have a new feature with one of our call recording vendors that we can enrich the account with every single new contact at that company. Oh, that's cool. Somebody else turned it on. Well, guess what? We had a call with IBM, and then it just went flooded with contact records, and then everything got all clogged because then it was trying to enrich real time. Right. So we just got to be really careful in that data supply chain of how the systems are talking to each other too, from a that technical quality standpoint. Because you can trust the data and say that this is good, but you don't want to have those misses. That's a pain in the butt to clean up.
Oh yes. I have a feeling most people have all been there. So
yes.
Cool. Should we get into some best practices?
Surely. I think we hit on one, right, which was automate what makes sense. Not everything deserves an automation. Case in point, your IBM flooded with the contacts after one call with them. Probably not super easy to streamline through all of those. But yeah, so we got some of the best practices listed here that we're going to run through. The first one, aligned definitions and glossary. What's pretty much what we've been talking about the last 5 minutes, right? Really trying to understand and get everybody on the same page internally about how we're defining these different things, prioritizing the different inbound motions as well. All kind of falls really into that first bucket there. The next one here, recurring data enrichment schedule. Of course, we just mentioned a case there where we've got some data automations that didn't totally make sense. So I think, your strategy around data enrichment and especially recurring data enrichment, it deserves, the team's input on exactly what's coming through, just to avoid some of those situations that we saw. But we could definitely dive, I think, more into that before we go any lower as well.
Yeah, and Chris just put in an interesting question, which is actually the third bullet point in here. So, Chris, great question. Question is essentially like, how does data lakes become critical? Company's grown 4x in 2 years, but still doesn't have data lake finance. There's misalignment between Salesforce and ERP. So I have a strong opinion in terms of two things. One, I'm a personal believer that data and data strategy, you should evaluate on a crawl, walk, run. And oftentimes people want to do the run stuff. And the run stuff is like data lake, Power BI and stuff like that. But like, if you haven't done half the stuff on this slide here of data definitions, and so on and so forth, that stuff isn't going to matter because, if Susie Q and Johnny still think an MQL are two different things, like having it in a data lake and showing up different is not going to matter, right? So like being able to do the crawl stuff extraordinarily well. And as a part of that, to specifically answer the question, you can actually get the information in Salesforce to align to the ERP, then I would just keep it in Salesforce without trying to like solve it. Oftentimes people just want to solve everything with tech. And it's like simplicity drives execution. And the simpler you keep stuff, the more aligned you're going to be across your tech stack. Now, the caveat to that is like oftentimes CRM to ERP integrations are like, it's challenging. It's challenging. But I'm curious, Cayden, Jessica, like, what are your thoughts? Like, how would you address the issue that Chris is bringing up?
Yeah, I have a whole arsenal of talks that I've done about this, a pretty strong viewpoint that especially early on, right? Yes, keep it simple. I think data lake is a solution, and I think it's good that we want to get there. But I think that what we're looking at is everything syncing, right? Like making sure that I'm this person and I'm represented the same way across my marketing system, my CRM system, my finance system. This account is represented the same way in finance that it is in Salesforce. That when I create an opportunity, I know that it's a renewal, not an upsell because it's mid-cycle, right? So all of those things is they're difficult, but it is technology agnostic. I'm also pretty firm on not trying to shove everything into your CRM and not trying to make your Salesforce a source of truth. So that's why I do like the way that you asked that question, Chris, is, do we need a data lake versus, shoving everything in Salesforce? I think that's part of the maturity curve. So I wouldn't, say, oh, well, I don't have this, so let's build a custom object. Let's build a field. Let's build an automation. So try not to shove everything into your Salesforce as the golden standard single source of truth, but get a system that allows everything to talk to each other.
And one additional best practice there, as you were thinking about trying to align data across various pieces of tech, one of the things we recommend a lot to our customers is something called a business systems council. And essentially what it is inside an organization, it's all the different tech owners or admins who meet on a reoccurring schedule. We typically recommend every other week. And they come together and show the entire list of priorities that people have requested, so on and so forth. And they don't just say yes to everything. This is not just a building to building sake, but you only say yes to stuff that is based upon the company's strategy and process. You build out a roadmap for the upcoming 2 weeks, make sure that the other admins know, oh, hey, if I'm doing this change in Salesforce, this is the impact on the ERP, or this is the impact on the marketing automation. Everybody then goes and builds. And in the next session, you talk about, do we execute against the roadmap, and then reprioritize the upcoming roadmap. This will greatly help you as you think about aligning data, exactly what Jessica's talking about, aligning data across systems, as well as making sure the same contact, all that type of stuff. Because oftentimes your marketing automation admin versus your CRM admin versus your ERP admin are very different individuals. And half of this is just a communication issue and making sure everybody's on the same page.
Great stuff there. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I wish a data council, systems council like that existed. Each time we try to bring Openprise, into a new client, that would help us so much, in our motions there. But yeah, it's, I think that message needs to be spread. That's the gospel right there. I think the next point here, with data enrichment systems buying guide, it doesn't matter, ask your community, get something good enough that integrates with your system. It's one of the things that I see on a daily basis as people come through and, they want to know the different partners that Openprise kind of partners with, to provide the enrichment solutions. And which one is, how do they validate the data from each partner? And really this question goes to, right, if there was one golden source partner, we wouldn't have a network of providers that we work with, right? So there is no single source of truth on, who's got the 100% perfect phone numbers for everyone that exists in their database, right? It is a recurring theme, I think, through this presentation and discussion of, everyone's kind of got, most of the data correct, and that's how you're able to make your decisions that come with it. I'd love, any additional input here from the rest of the panel on, data enrichment, kind of going with the vendors that, you vetted, you trust, and, moving forward and being able to make decisions based on the data you're getting from those providers.
Jessica, what have you done when you bought enrichment in the past?
Kind of vet a couple of vendors against each other and see what's going on. Personally, I haven't bought any one of the newer ones on the market. Like there's some really cool stuff that people are doing with AI. Again, recently we're using ZoomInfo. All of the vendors are going to say they use some kind of AI, right? Some kind of traditional AI built in number places for data validation, like ICP and rich matching, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll, say, hey, we have an upgraded package where you can do this and this. Start really simply. I've used companies like Lucia was one of them. I've used LeadSpace in the past. LeadSpace, for example, that was a good choice for me back in Series C. Most of our ICP was US. LeadSpace and LinkedIn at the time spoke really well together. So that was some of my criteria to say, all right, I don't want to gate all of my content and force a company email address, because I'm selling to developers. Developers want to be marketed to. They put their personal email address everywhere. So I want to allow them to do that. So they put their personal email address in, and that was a highly weighted criteria for me in that decision purchase. So LeadSpace was really helpful in matching I'm Jessica Zangre at gmail.com, but I work at Bazaarvoice. So if I come in through the funnel, I'm matched to Bazaarvoice. So think about your own criteria. Think about the things that allow, again, certain plumbing and supply chain things to happen. Like I worked with a vendor that allowed that IBM thing to happen, and I couldn't stop it. It was like Moses parting the Red Sea. Like I couldn't, there was nothing in the configuration that I could do to stop it at the time. They might have upgraded since then, but really look at your requirements, look at your technical capability to maintain, because like we said, this is not a one-time exercise. Yeah, and just vet it out. But I think we said this yesterday, just pick the one that sucks the least. Talk to your community, talk to people in your similar cohort, similar go-to-market motions, and use what they're using.
I love your thoughts and comments, and I will +1 a bunch of them. The other things I would add in there is there's no perfect solution. So part of this is just an ROI. One of the things that we typically recommend to a lot of our clients is one of the goals you should think about, particularly as you're trying to vet data enrichment platforms, is trying to get your SOM into your CRM. So if you think about total addressable market, SAM, SOM, right? Your serviceable addressable market. Who is the entire universe of companies you want to go after? So in addition to the appending key information, industry, address, all that other stuff, how do you make sure you're getting the entire universe of companies you legitimately can go after and get that into your CRM? Because then as you think about it, you actually have the whole universe and you're not actually trying to add additional ones. So food for thought there. The other comment I think you made is really important, Jessica, is the fact that data enrichment platforms, particularly via geos and sometimes via industries, vary greatly. And so like certain ones in the US are vastly better than other ones in EMEA and even APAC. So that can vary greatly. And sometimes there's like specific ones for specific industries. So I know Definitive is one of the big ones for healthcare, so on and so forth. So things to think about. The other
and
just
an email and phone number too. One might be better at email and EMEA, one might not be. So it's again, your criteria is very, very important talking to these vendors.
100%. The last comment I was gonna make is like, as you think about it, as you're either shopping for new ones or like reevaluating ones, think about one of the best negotiating questions we ask whenever we help negotiate on the behalf of our tech vendors is like, when is the end of your fiscal quarter? It immediately puts the AI on the back foot. And a lot of these enrichment platforms right now, you can get super steep discounts, like Zoom Info. Like if you're negotiating Zoom Info, ask for like a 40-50% discount. Like they're giving them away like hotcakes right now. But particularly if you can do it right around either end of month or end of quarter for them, you'll get a really good, so part of it is when it is, but like, that's one of the first questions I always ask whenever like you go into a negotiation. So little food for thought as you're going through that.
Solid tip.
Yeah. Cool. What else?
No, great buying advice. I think, fantastic there. I'd say the last point that we have on this slide, right? To not let the end users get wrapped around, specific data issues. I think this is coming directly from, some of the things that we've talked about in the call, right? Where one record is wrong, doesn't mean the whole database is wrong. Definitely, we can expand more on this as well. Yeah. And then maybe open it up for more questions from the chat. I'd like to see that too.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add here is like getting back to the pyramid. You're just trying to answer those questions in the pyramid, right? It's like, do we trust the data, right? And it's less about being perfect or right. And it's more about like, yeah, it's good enough that we trust the data. Okay, based upon the data, is it timely? And can we legitimately make questions around it? So like, as you're thinking about your data integrity / enrichment, I would think about it in those like 3 broader questions of like, all right, what are the things we are doing to drive it up the scale? Because again, as we started off, and I know we're a little kind of like, controversial in this, like no one, particularly at the executive level, cares about your data integrity. They care about that top level question. Like, I want to be able to make data-driven decisions. So what are we doing, all the tactics as operators to be able to get to that? And again, this is all the sausage making that we care about as operators, but none of the executives are going to care about.
Yeah, I actually even like the first thing that Kathleen said in their comment was data integrity enabled us to make the right decisions. I don't know if it's, I like that or my trauma response for being in RevOps for so long, but when there's a data quality issue, that's a forcing function for strategic conversations. So I like when it's like Marie Kondo of data, like I like mess, right? So that data integrity, because there was data integrity issues, again, it forced them to take the right approach. So I guess, from a, internalized standpoint, it's okay if there's data issues. Nobody has it perfect. It's a good forcing function, and it forces you up that pyramid.
Cool. Should we take some questions?
Any questions? Yeah.
Right. I don't see any yet, but I'm going to ask one anyway while people type away. How do you recommend handling when balancing enrichment versus user entry? So let's say sales is proactively calling, they update the phone number, and your enrichment tool just keeps writing it over, and it frustrates the crap out of them.
Date stamping. Yep. Date stamping and again, agreed upon rules for
Yes.
for what is the gold standard. I always go to the input from sales as if it's updated, if that last field is updated by a user, then do not overwrite that, right? Trust our users, make sure we have that buy-in. Maybe there's organizations that say, no, I don't trust my SDRs to put in, crap in there. So no, keep it at the source of truth like we asked. So get the alignment, but I always tend to again make sure we date stamp and make sure I put the users input at the top of that hierarchy.
And as a part of, agree with everything Jessica said, as a part of the user input, very clear around SLAs around telling the users where they can track stuff. So if an SDR is going to put in like an industry or something like that, they can only pull from one source. This isn't like, hey, I'm going to go use Bing and try and figure this out. Like, all right, if you're trying to like align industries around nice codes or things like that, like be very clear where they can pull data from. The other thing, again, some people have a different level of trust of certain users. You can lock down certain fields to essentially say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. SDR, we trust you around this stuff, but this stuff we don't trust you around. We're just going to append this stuff with our data enrichment platform. And the day stamps love that idea.
So we have, what are some of the success metrics to measure data quality, how a team is doing on data integrity? And that's pretty broad. So maybe we start with broad and then go to a specific example for like MedPick or medic qualification.
Cool. So I think I personally think there's a qualitative and a quantitative way to answer this question. So I think the qualitative way, and this is like not necessarily, and again, we're all data nerds and I use nerd super affectionately because I am one. We always want to measure stuff. The qualitative way is like, am I getting a bunch of questions around the data? Like, or are executives and leaders and individuals just being able to kind of make decisions around the data? And if it's more the latter, your data integrity is good enough, right? And again, so I think that's the qualitative way. I think on the quantitative way, this gets back into some things that Jessica was talking about of having clear, what are we updating? When do we update it? The SLAs around it. But the other thing you can do is build, if you haven't built broken window dashboarding. So around key fields, and this is more like in sales pipeline advancement, revenue funnel, revenue meaning marketing to sales, stuff like that. If you're using something like MedPick, hey, how many of our S2 opportunities are missing identify pain? Things like that. So you can identify that. The other thing you can do on, this is more probably an annual exercise, is you can pull a list of all of your fields inside of your CRM and essentially say, who's used this? When was the last time it's updated? So it's kind of this ongoing like data field cleanup exercise. Jessica, what else would you add to that?
Yeah, I think if you wanted to, like, I'm pretty visual, so I'm thinking about like how I put this in a slide, right? I think about buckets and pillars and whatever. But if I were to think about it like success criteria, I would think about it in maybe 3 different buckets, and more qualitative and quantitative. One at the account firmographic company level, one at the person demographic level, and then 3 at the kind of aggregate, how is this affecting our pipeline? So like at the account level, again, maybe kind of going back to my original point, the one that nobody cares about, we care about it, kind of the bottom of the funnel that says, hey, if you want to make decisions off of vertical, if you want to make decisions off of annual revenue, if you want to make decisions off of this, only 10% of that is populated. Our goal is to get to 90% so that we make those decisions. Those types of things on that, broken window dashboard. At the contact company or contact demographic level, same thing. Maybe include things like activity metrics. Hey, 80% of these emails we're getting from this vendor is bouncing. My SDR team is pissed. They're wasting time. So what's going on? Okay, well, we use this vendor for phone numbers. Let's put a never bounce on top of it or something like that to make sure that we could filter that. So that's something we could look at, success metrics at the contact level. And then at aggregate, you could Google, I feel like I Googled this one time. It was a Serious Decisions, companies that have good data integrity produce 50% more revenue. Look at this exercise and make a point in time. 6 months later, make a point in time, see your pipeline go up. Tell a story. Gotta be close, right? If it goes down, then there's a different, there's the different something else going on with your product market fit or something like that. But I've seen data integrity, milestone here, or no, flag post, we're on milestone, flag post, and then kind of look at the up and to the right trends and make a deduction.
Would you all agree or disagree with the statement that data integrity aligns with how useful the data you're asking for is to the person who has to enter it, or how usable your system is?
I would, by the way, Jessica, the answer you just provided was vastly better than the answer that I provided. So anyways, listen to Jessica. That was a better answer.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, it was much better than mine. Can you ask that question one more time?
Yes, but Campbell, please ask that question one more time.
Okay. So when we're measuring data integrity, instead of, I guess I'll just make a statement. Instead of focusing on data integrity, sometimes it's appropriate to focus on how usable your systems are and how many barriers you're putting in the way of entering or collecting the key data. I think we also tend to have a really high bar for data entry and not always realize how much we're asking of our users. So I love the whole audit concept here and actually reviewing that, but please go.
Yeah, so I think what this gets back to, and I think the question you're trying to, like, it's somewhat the pyramid. It's also like how we personally think about RevOps. Of like, if you think about the pyramid, right, and we're talking about integrity, timely, data-driven decisions, what you're trying to get to is that highest level. And so it's almost like the inputs are driving the outputs. And the inputs is like, do we have strong data integrity? Oh, and by the way, the input to that is like, what are the impediments? What are the SLAs around like driving data into the systems, and how well is that system set up to be able to make data-driven decisions? So I would almost argue that if you can make data-driven decisions, the inputs you have into that, meaning not only how good is the data, but also how easy it is for people, SDRs, AEs, CSMs, to put the data in, your auto enrichment, all that type of stuff. So it's almost, what are the inputs that are driving the outputs? And I think if you're able to make easy data-driven decisions and you don't have a bunch of people screaming at you of like, oh my God, this takes me 500,000 hours on a weekly basis, you probably have pretty good data integrity. But if it's the flip where, we saw in our poll that most people are not at that third level, the fact you're not at that third level is probably a function of like, all right, are we creating a bunch of impediments to people putting this stuff in? Do we have a clear SLAs around? I would take a look at the inputs that are trying to like get to that output, which is that highest level of the pyramid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a good question from a RevOps perspective, because we're talking a lot about the RevOps, like kind of data czar arm of what we do. And then there's a systematic czar of what we do, which is actually configuring the systems. So it's something like, hey, users, you are not allowed to create accounts. Don't touch it, right? Don't touch account name, don't touch vertical, right? Like that's part of our agreement. But hey, here's, here based on our data insights, go after these accounts. Well, we don't have contacts. Go to LinkedIn and create them, right? And then they say, well, that's a giant pain in the ass. I have to swivel chair and type in. So then as RevOps, our system arm goes, oh, okay, well, there's Lucia. Okay, well, let's look at a solution to say, all right, here's a nice little Chrome extension. You find somebody on LinkedIn, poof, they're in Salesforce. Poof, you gave them, their own data enrichment. It's really nice when you kind of give them really enably things. Mm-hmm. My next blog post. To give them a little bit more empowerment in the system, make it easy for them without compromising data integrity.
Right. And I think it's also about balancing what the business is asking for and what's reasonable and actually important. Right. So if your product team comes to you and says, we need these 20 questions answered, do you?
No. And I think this is why, like, those strategic questions, like I mentioned earlier, RevOps, strategy, process, tools, data enablement. You don't just say yes to everything, right? Like this gets into the strategy of like, hey, do those 20 questions actually advance our strategy? Maybe, maybe not. Like, oh, can we take the 20 and reduce it to 1 or 2? Like, because you're always trying to set things up based upon strategy and process. You're not trying to like dictate. This is, I think, one of the biggest mistakes a lot of RevOps teams and systems teams make is they say yes to everything and they don't push back and are not a strategic partner to the business to essentially say, well, hang on a second, why are we asking these 20 questions? Feels like to me you're trying to get to this strategic decision. Is that fair? Okay, if that's fair, what if we just pull this data we already have in the system and ask one additional question? And that saves the team a bunch of time. Like, be that proactive partner so that you're helping to save and optimize the go-to-markets team and helping to advance the business.
So I just put in a final call for questions. Any final thoughts, pieces of advice that you would leave people with?
Jessica, what else you got?
Final thoughts. I don't know. What else do I got? Yeah, no, Rhys, I agree. And Cayden mentioned the 5 whys yesterday. That's always kind of in the back of my mind. All right, just continuing to ask the why. And that's why RevOps is a thing now and not just, help desk tickets, Jira tickets, configure this. If you have a RevOps title, you are a strategic partner. You're not help desk. So this is a great example of how an enrichment project or strategy can turn you into help desk real fast if you don't, continue to answer those questions.
Could not agree more. And Cayden's comments about the 5 whys yesterday, one of the things we always say to our clients is like, data is only important if you can make a decision around it. And so like thinking back, then, taking a step back, if you agree with that, if you take a step back, like, then how are we like optimizing our data integrity so we can make decisions around this data? We mentioned we're all here in Colorado, like measuring leads in a full moon on a Tuesday afternoon when there's a fire in Boulder. Like, why would we ever measure that? So like, do we need to actually create data integrity around those types of questions? Yeah.
I resemble that remark, Rhys. Yeah.
Yes, it's a little scary right now in Colorado.
It really is.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, I have a fire drill, but no, really, guys, like, there's a fire drill.
The one that's
Okay.
a slow read.
Yeah, I was gonna say we should probably all read this question. I'm trying to distill it, but I need to get through it first.
Many companies, including small, I think my last small company, I think we used 4 different enrichment vendors, which was too many for that company, but it is typical.
The other, and I think we touched on this earlier, is like no enrichment is going to be perfect, and like adding 2 or 3 or 4, you're only going to get incremental gains if anything. I think this gets into like a lot of the best practices that Jessica was talking about. Is like, all right, what's the SLAs for how the reps are entering stuff, so on and so forth. And then the really important part here is like, you as RevOps need to be messaging this. It's like, hey, this is a very good data integrity. Oh, by the way, if you find something, just send me a note here. We don't need to bring it up in a meeting. I'll take care of it, so on and so forth. Don't let people get wrapped around the axle on those disputes. Those disputes kill so much productivity. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, what you're trying to do with the data is, again, answer a question. So like, if the question is like, yeah, 10 MQLs versus 12 MQLs, like, it doesn't really matter if like what you're shooting for is 100 MQLs, because you're still low on MQLs. So like, debating 10 versus 12 is not the right debate. The conversation, like, what are we doing to drive more MQLs?
That example gave me flashbacks.
I wake up in the middle, no, MQLs. So
And Zoom Info is one of the ones I do have, personal experience with issues with, anything in EMEA. So that's kind of one of those vendors that's, there's not a lot of great vendors in EMEA. Don't forget about PII too, when you're doing this enrichment, things as well, right? When you're talking, especially, the EMEA region, but, what you could do, like a potential solve, is say, okay, maybe we need to route, if everything in EMEA is not as higher quality based off of Zoom Info, maybe change and route everything to an SDR for them to vet or something like that, right? Change the throughput, or maybe the SLAs of the follow-up to take the burden off of maybe more expensive resource while you're trying to find another vendor, find and or justify another vendor for that region. See if there's something more efficient you can do at the top of the funnel. Because yeah, reps going and validating data, They don't like that. I don't like it either.
Well, and JP, your point earlier about doing bake-offs and giving them a set number of records and comparing the results, that can be extremely useful in either creating or disputing how
Mhm.
better off you'll be.
And if they say they don't do that, that's ask again.
Red flag.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much to our panelists for sharing their knowledge. Thank you to everyone who is attending. Have a great day, everyone. Well,
The Earth? Oh, mine doesn't do that. No.
What happened
Wow.
what happened to the fireworks? I saw everyone trying to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. There was a fireworks one.
Live Christmas.
Oh,
There
there
it
is
is.
a fireworks one. Oh,
We are our icebreaker. I've just decided to start the day with violence and ask people if CRO is working or a failed experiment. And I agree with Chris.
Pamela's choosing violence, and I'm hopping on that train today. And I agree
Coming
with
out swinging.